Welcome to another show of Present Her, where we've been talking to ladies who have made the transition from playing the game at the highest level and actually going on to stay in touch with it in one form or another, but particularly through broadcasting, either radio, television, or both. Our guest today is someone who's, I don't know how to even begin to describe her to you, because she's not just multifaceted, she's multi-faceted. Imagine being a specialist lawyer in a specific area of financial wrongdoing or fixing it, being an artist of no mean talent, a globe-trotter right from the time she was very, very young, playing for both England in terms of representing the country and for the Netherlands. Welcome, Isabelle Westbury.
I think you've given me far too much of an introduction. I think I'm more what I'd call a Jill of all trades. I've got lots of fingers and lots of different pies. It doesn't mean I excel in all of them.
No, it's a pleasure to have you, Izzy, and I know you've been very, very busy with lots of stuff. So thank you for finding the time. I know your weekends are very precious, but thank you for pulling an hour out for us. We appreciate it very much.
Oh, it's a privilege to be here, Prakash. It really is.
Terrific. So let's, like that Sound of Music song goes, I think a good place to start is at the beginning, isn't it? So let's do that. And tell all our viewers how your geologist father's movements around the world took you to places that not too many people would count as having visited in an entire lifetime. And you did that all before you got into your teens.
Well, I think also what stood out and what's quite sort of funny being here on a cricket program is that all of the countries which we lived in my early years are not what you would call cricket playing nations, perhaps, or at least not much of it. I was born when my parents just moved from the Ivory Coast to Malaysia, to Sarawak, and then we went from there to the north of the Netherlands, where there's lots of Frisian cows and not much else. And then we went to Syria, to Damascus for 4 years, which is a wonderful experience. But as you can imagine, not much cricket in any of those places really. And it was only when I must have been 12 when we came back. I say back at least to Western Europe, so near to our home country of England. We came to live in The Hague in the Netherlands, and that's when I first got introduced to cricket, aged 12, I guess. But yes, a very sort of nomadic childhood beforehand.
Yes, but those experiences, you were obviously very young and growing up, but outside the cricket aspect of it, they must have sort of left a very deep and interesting and diverse imprint on your mind about just life in those countries and the way people went about their daily chores, what their values were, what mattered and didn't matter. Of course, it was a much more peaceful world at the time too.
Yes, I mean, it goes without saying, I think, that when you're a child, you don't know anything different. So to me, it wasn't unusual. I mean, I remember coming home to England. We always used to come home for Easter or for Christmas to see our family, and other children being kind of like, oh, does this mean that you come from those places? Are you Arabic? No, obviously not. But no, we were very lucky. I think it was a time when I guess the expat world, my mother didn't need to work, so it was very easy for her to go and sort of take the family to where my father was. We lived, a privileged life, I think, going around the world, but also being very much absorbed in the culture. I think my parents have always, it's part of the reason why they wanted to travel and live in these different cultures was not to go and live in a sort of shut up camps somewhere, which can happen. We lived in the heart of Damascus. I think that's got a very vivid memory. We lived there at a time, as you say, when the world was, or at least that part of the world, was a much nicer place. From 98 to 2002, that I hope it was very multicultural. I mean, it's for hundreds of years was once a centre of civilization. I think we felt we got the last of it in a very welcoming and very free society. I guess now I'm sitting here when the Civil War's been going on there for almost a decade, and I think that I was just extremely lucky to have been there at a time when it was such an amazing place.
So coming to The Hague, where you moved back after these early travels, if I'm not mistaken, reading somewhere that it was football's loss that you actually went into cricket. Tell us about that part.
I think that's one of the wonderful things when you leave one game and pick another when you're early enough to have. I can say that I was going to become the best footballer there ever was, but the truth is I probably wasn't. I had a good left foot, but that was about it. No, football was my first love, and I think that kind of represented my childhood around the world, where football is perhaps more of a widely global game. I loved it. I was infatuated by Alan Shearer of Newcastle United, and Ajax as well at the time. And I loved football. I played it a lot. I played with the boys. I didn't really think it was odd that I was the only girl. Quite often I just wanted to play sport, but it was unfortunately at a time when I was about 12, 13, when the club, according to the national governing body rules, I wasn't allowed to play football as a girl in a boys' team beyond the age of 13. And the club sort of just reluctantly sort of said that's the way it is. There was nothing they could do about it. It was the rules and regulations at the time. I think they've changed. But I could no longer play football at that local club, and I think the nearest women's club was quite far away, and my parents weren't particularly happy about me having to go and play there. I don't think there was a junior team. It would have been a senior team when I was 12 or 13. And so the club sort of said, well, we have got a cricket section in the summer, and there are no rules about girls playing in boys' teams. So why don't you play cricket? And that's pretty much what I did, because I just wanted to play. I wanted to play sport. And so I went from being the only girl in the boys' football team to being the only girl in the boys' cricket team. And I absolutely loved it.
And was that something that sort of just came naturally to you? Did you just take to it very, very effortlessly in terms of, the whole setup of rules? And obviously you'd followed or seen cricket, that's a given. But in terms of playing it and playing it at even a club level, was that something very easy for you? Just came to you, or did you have to work on it?
I feel at that age, just before you reach your teens, I think you're either, if you're sporty, you can kind of turn your hand to most sports, and if you've got a good eye for the ball, and I obviously had some kind of coordination, and I was reasonably athletic. I think it all happened. Well, I don't know. You haven't seen how fast I run these days. It's quite hard to go back. I think it was quite a late entry into the game. I mean, I played, I guess, a bit of beach cricket when I used to come back for summer holidays to England, but that was it. I must have been terrible technically, but I was reasonably tall, reasonably athletic, and just wanted to play and do well, and I threw myself into it. I mean, I don't think I started in the sort of third team of the under 13s, and then got to the sort of the first team in the next year. And yeah, I think I was just lucky. And I think the other thing to say is that Holland or the Netherlands, even though it's obviously quite a small cricketing country, I think if you are able to get into one of the clubs, they've got a very robust infrastructure. They've got good support. They quite often get a lot of South Africans come over in their winter to play in the Netherlands, because you've got quite a similar language in the Afrikaans and the Dutch language. There's very strong bonds there. I think we had Andre Adams actually as one of our coaches at one point. Neil Mackenzie came and coached us. I mean, at that point, I had no idea who he was, really, apart from that he had a supermodel wife, which everybody at the club seemed to be very, very happy about when she came over. But otherwise, so we had some very good coaching set up. And so you had quite a sort of, because it was such a small cricketing world, if you were in it, you had very often, you had the privilege of having a one-to-one with Neil Mackenzie. I mean, that's absurd thinking about it.
But to your point about starting with club cricket and moving up, you obviously made it. You were a lot better than what you're letting on, because you made it into the Dutch team for the European Championship, if I remember right. And while we won't go into the statistics and strike on averages and number of wickets per 100 balls or whatever, we won't do that. But the fact is, you did make it to the national team, and you represented the country, which at the time clearly wasn't a cricketing powerhouse, wasn't probably something that in the women's game was a very strong nation. but it gave you and all those who played with you, I suppose, the belief that you could go on and perform at the highest level in women's cricket, didn't it?
Sorry, I think you're probably right about not going into the statistics, because it was certainly a baptism by fire. It was, I mean, it's definitely fair to say that the women's cricket within the Netherlands was very small. I mean, I played exclusively with boys at a club level. I didn't really know that women's cricket really existed until this sort of, I found out there was a women's cricket team that represented the Netherlands. And I thought, well, okay, this is quite a good way to play. If I want to go and play internationally, I need to start playing with women. And I also knew at that point they're playing in the European Championships, and I had a British passport. I am English by birth. My parents are very English, and I kind of thought, well, if I am good enough, I had no idea, obviously, very little to go on, then I'll play for Holland and see how good this English lot are. Turns out pretty good. At least compared to me at the time as a 15-year-old whippersnapper who thought that I was bee's knees. And yeah, it was a sort of, right, if I still think I can get on from there, that's when I need to think about going back to England at some point. But, you know, when you're 15, 16, you think you can rule the world. And certainly I did. And certainly I found out that there's a lot of other very good athletes out there. I remember playing against a sort of, 15-year-old Holly Colvin and Sarah Taylor. And oh my goodness, I actually have vivid memories of playing against Holly Colvin in the 2005 European Under-21 Championships. It must have been I don't know if she'd already played the Ashes at that point and was about to go and play the Ashes in that summer. I remember thinking, oh, I'm the same age as you. I'm going to skip down the track and smack you over your head. Oh, wait, I've been stumped.
Yes.
So yes, it was an eye-opener. But, you know, I think it's fair to say that throughout my career, I was more competitive than I was talented. So
that's a huge quality, right? And there are so many sportsmen and athletes around the world who may not naturally have been as gifted as some others, and who've used mental strength, things like being competitive, just being smart about it. And in that context, how did you sort of make those transitions? Because those continued through the time when you came back to England, then started playing in the county championship, moved from Somerset initially, then to Middlesex, captain Middlesex, all those moves. I think somewhere along the way, wicket keeping sort of took a back seat. But you did begin as a wicket keeper. So how did that happen? Was it just that they didn't have anybody who was willing to goal keep behind the stop?
It really was that. I mean, that was the stage of women's cricket. It was very much like if you were athletic and had a good eye for the ball, which was kind of what the qualities I possessed. And I think if you go back and look at some of the, and I'm not comparing myself to them at all because I was nowhere near their level, but if you look at some of the real all-rounders of my kind of cohort, you're looking at your Nat Sivers and your Elise Perrys. And I think something that's consistent through their careers is they started off playing a lot of sports when they were younger. I mean, Elise Perry famously for football. I actually went to the same school as Nat Siver in the Netherlands. We went to the British school in the Netherlands in The Hague. She was 2 years younger than me. And I remember being very put out by her because I previously had been the best girls footballer at the school. And suddenly this little whippersnapper comes along. Who's this Natalie Siver girl? And she was brilliant at all sports. You know, she was amazing. I mean, I hated her for the first few years because she was better. And I think that we just played every sport that you could. I mean, I remember being very upset that the girls couldn't play on the boys rugby team, for example, at the age of 13, 14. But we played cricket, tennis, hockey, football. I think I did, cross-country running, that kind of everything that you could, you played, and it was encouraged. And I think this is something that we have got to be careful in this increasingly professionalized era, is that we don't deny that opportunity for athletes to become true all-rounders first and cricketers second, because that's how you find your Sivers, your Perrys. You give them that freedom to enjoy their sport, to choose what they think they're naturally good at. And cricket is unique in offering that all-round kind of role. And I was an all-rounder, not to the same pedigree, but that's why I was able to wicket keep, because it was literally, we haven't got a keeper. And I was like, well, I like catching. And at that point, I think I'd realised that despite being reasonably tall, I kind of ran in like pretty fast and bowled a little bit slower than you might expect. That perhaps a career in fast bowling wasn't my calling. So I just, I wanted to get involved.
When you did come back to England and started playing there, was it just that there was your role as a sort of spinner who batted or a batter again that was prompted by the circumstance of the team or the balance of the side, or was it just something that you liked more or liked less or were better at or otherwise?
I think it just reflects the fact that I, in every team I guess I played in a representative level, or when I was a reasonable athlete, but it was a struggle to get into the county setup, it was a struggle to get into the next levels, England, etc. So I guess trying to look at what areas I necessarily hold my place in the team by being a batter alone. I obviously was not quite the fast ball I wanted to be, and at that point I think we had a keeper, Sophie Le Marchand, who was in the England Academy, so that was that wasn't going to happen. So it was a sort of a case of I came over to go to university and played for Somerset at the same time. I was the overseas, you won't believe it from my accent, but I was the overseas player for Somerset for 2 seasons at the same time as Justin Langer was. So I like to consider myself the equivalent of Justin Langer when I was over at Somerset. But it was very much a case of just trying to find a way to be picked, I guess.